The salon was a symphony of controlled chaos, a place where the hum of hairdryers and the sharp scent of acrylic monomer formed the backdrop to a dozen overlapping conversations. This was Maya's world, a vibrant neighborhood hub where she spent 10 hours a day transforming hands and hair, making other women feel beautiful. At 29, she was a master of her craft, her own nails and hair a flawless advertisement for her skill. But beneath the warm, professional smile, her eyes held a deep-seated exhaustion, a quiet loneliness that followed her home to her empty apartment each night. She moved with a practiced grace, her hands steady as she applied a final glossy topcoat for a client, completely unaware that the simple, predictable rhythm of her life was about to be shattered by a miracle she never saw coming. The pain struck without warning, a piercing, white-hot blade that sliced through her abdomen and stole her breath. Maya gasped, the tiny bottle of polish slipping from her grasp and clattering onto the tiled floor. Her hand flew to her side as she doubled over, a strangled cry of agony escaping her lips. In an instant, the salon's cheerful noise dissolved into panicked shouts. Her co-workers rushed to her, their faces etched with alarm. "It's her appendix! It must have burst!" someone yelled, the amateur diagnosis spreading through the room like a shockwave. They hauled her to her feet, the world a dizzying blur of color and sound, as they guided her out into the harsh afternoon light, their voices a frantic buzz as they rushed her toward the nearest emergency room. It's truly terrifying how a single, ordinary moment can shatter into a million pieces without any warning. And if you've ever felt that, I hope you'll subscribe and follow this story, because it helps us share more accounts of people who found strength in the chaos. The emergency room was another planet, a sterile, cold environment where the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. The friendly chatter of the salon was replaced by the steady, anxious beeping of machines and the hushed, urgent tones of medical staff. They laid Maya on a gurney, the harsh fluorescent lights overhead, making her skin look pale and clammy. A nurse spoke to her in a soothing voice while administering pain medication through an IV. But the drugs did little to dull the relentless, cresting waves of agony that seized her body. Each wave was more powerful than the last, a brutal tide that dragged her under, making it impossible to think or speak. She could see the growing confusion on the faces of the doctors and nurses as they prepared her for tests. This wasn't a textbook appendicitis. The pain was too rhythmic, too overwhelming, too primal. An older, experienced nurse with calm, knowing eyes bypassed the frantic preparations. She walked over to Maya, took one look at her writhing form, and placed a firm hand on her swollen belly, a place Maya had simply dismissed as a few extra pounds from stress and poor eating habits. The nurse's expression shifted instantly from professional concern to stunning, absolute certainty. She leaned in close, her voice cutting through the fog of pain that enveloped Maya. "Honey, you need to listen to me very carefully," she said, her tone both urgent and grounding. "This isn't appendicitis. You're in labor." The words hung in the air, utterly nonsensical, impossible. Maya's mind went blank, a silent, terrifying void where comprehension should have been. Labor. The thought was so alien it didn't even register as a possibility. As a scream of pure, unadulterated disbelief tore from her throat, the room exploded into a flurry of organized action, her entire world fractured by a truth she had never, not for a single second, suspected. The world returned in fragments. First, the rhythmic beep of a machine beside her bed, then the starchy smell of clean linens, and finally, the profound hollow ache in her body. Maya's mind was a fog, replaying the nurse's impossible words, the blur of motion, the primal screams that felt like they belonged to someone else. A nurse entered the room, her smile gentle but professional, carrying a small, tightly wrapped bundle. She spoke in a soft voice, explaining that the baby was healthy, a girl, 7 pounds and 1 ounce. Maya just stared, her eyes wide and vacant. The bundle was an abstraction, a concept her brain refused to process. It couldn't be real. This was a nightmare, a bizarre, pain-fueled hallucination she would wake up from at any moment. Back in the familiar chaos of the salon, the nurse, sensing her disconnection, moved closer. "It's important for you to hold her," she said, her voice firm yet kind. With practiced ease, she placed the warm, swaddled infant onto Maya's chest. The contact was electric. A sudden, jolting wave of sensation shot through Maya's exhausted body. The baby, whose name the universe had not yet given her, shifted slightly, a tiny sigh escaping her lips. Her warmth seeped through the thin hospital gown, a living, breathing heat against Maya's own skin. Maya slowly looked down, her gaze falling upon a perfect, miniature face, a dusting of dark hair, and impossibly small fingers peeking from the blanket. In that instant, the fog of shock and denial evaporated, replaced by a feeling so immense, so fiercely protective, it stole her breath all over again. It wasn't a thought, it was a certainty that bloomed in her soul. This was her daughter, but love, she quickly learned, did not pay bills. As the initial, overwhelming wave of emotion settled, a colder, sharper feeling took its place. Absolute terror. Lying in that sterile bed, with her tiny, unknown daughter sleeping on her chest, the full weight of her reality came crashing down. She had less than $200 in her bank account. Her rent was due in a week. She had no crib, no car seat, no diapers, not a single item a baby needed. Her life was a carefully balanced house of cards built on long hours and cheap takeout, and this beautiful, terrifying miracle was a hurricane set to tear it all down. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed to mock her, each pulse a reminder of the two lives now tethered to her impossibly fragile financial state. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Her first phone call was to Maria, the salon owner. She tried to keep her voice steady, to explain the inexplicable, but the words came out in a jumbled, panicked rush. "There was a baby. I didn't know. I'm in the hospital." On the other end of the line, there was a long, stunned silence, followed by a barrage of disbelieving questions. "A baby? What do you mean you didn't know? Are you okay?" Maya could hear the undertones of suspicion, the seeds of the gossip that would soon flourish in the fertile ground of the salon. She imagined the whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment that would greet her if she ever returned. The place that had been her entire world now felt like a courtroom, where she had already been tried and found guilty of some bizarre, unimaginable negligence. The next call was harder. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't looked at in nearly a year. Mark. He was a memory from a brief, forgettable relationship, a man whose last name she barely recalled. Her hand trembled as she pressed the call button. His voice was just as she remembered it, laced with an easygoing charm that now felt grating. When she told him, his laughter was the first response. He thought it was a joke. When he finally realized she was serious, the charm vanished, replaced by a cold, hard denial. "That's impossible, Maya. It can't be mine." "You're mistaken." He made vague promises to call back, to figure things out, but she knew he wouldn't. Hanging up the phone, a profound and desolate loneliness washed over her. She was utterly, completely on her own. It's a devastating feeling to realize you have to face your biggest storm alone. If you've ever felt that way, please subscribe, because your support helps us continue to tell stories of people who found their own light in the dark. The hospital system itself felt like an adversary. A social worker with a clipboard and tired eyes came to her room, asking a series of detached, probing questions. Did she have a support system? What were her living arrangements? Was the home safe for an infant? Each question felt like a test she was failing, a formal assessment of her inadequacy. She had no good answers. Her support system was a handful of co-workers who likely thought she was crazy. And her home was a small, one-bedroom apartment filled with styling tools and half-empty bottles of nail polish, not a cradle. The woman made notes on her clipboard, her expression unreadable, and Maya felt a surge of defensive anger. She wanted to scream that this wasn't her fault, that she was a good person, that she would be a good mother if only the world would give her a chance. Lying awake that night, she finally understood how this could have happened. Her life had been a blur of motion, a constant state of exhaustion. She worked 10 hours a day on her feet, fueled by coffee and the sheer will to make it to the next paycheck. She ate standing up, grabbing whatever was fast and cheap. The signs had all been there, masquerading as symptoms of her demanding lifestyle. The fatigue she chalked up to overwork, the occasional nausea she blamed on bad takeout. Even the weight gain around her middle she dismissed as the natural consequence of stress and a poor diet. She had been so focused on simply surviving, on getting through each day, that she had become a stranger to her own body, unable to hear it screaming a secret she wasn't prepared to know. Leaving the hospital was the most surreal experience of her life. They placed the baby, who she had decided to name Lily, into a loaner car seat and wheeled her to the curb. The bright, noisy world felt alien and threatening. A taxi ride home to her apartment building felt like a journey to a foreign land. Pushing open her front door, the silence and stillness of her small living space was jarring. It was a space designed for one. There was her worn-out couch, her small television, and a stack of magazines on the coffee table. There was no hint of a baby, no sign that a new life had been expected or welcomed. The apartment, once her lonely sanctuary, now felt like a stark, physical manifestation of her unpreparedness, its quiet walls echoing her own internal panic. That first night alone was a trial by fire. Lily woke up screaming, a raw, piercing cry that seemed to vibrate through the thin apartment walls. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She stumbled through the darkness, her mind a frantic blank slate. Was she hungry? Was she cold? Did she need to be changed? She fumbled with the diaper, putting it on backward at first. She struggled to mix the formula, her shaking hands spilling the powder on the counter. Lily's cries intensified, her tiny face turning a blotchy red, and Maya felt her own control begin to crumble. Sinking to the kitchen floor, she pulled her daughter to her chest and wept with her, two souls adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. It's in those moments of total despair that we often find the first spark of who we are meant to become, and following this journey by subscribing truly means a lot to us. After what felt like hours, Lily finally wore herself out and took the bottle, her desperate cries softening into quiet, contented gurgles. The sudden peace was a balm on Maya's frayed nerves. In the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through the window, she just held her, rocking back and forth on the cool kitchen floor. She studied every detail of her daughter's face, the curve of her cheek, the delicate shell of her ear, the way her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. The crushing weight of her fear hadn't vanished, but in that quiet, intimate moment, it was joined by something else, something far more powerful. A fierce, primal wave of love so profound it felt like it could reshape the world. This tiny person was hers to protect, hers to fight for. The next morning, a soft knock on her door startled her. She opened it to find two of her co-workers from the salon, Maria and Jessica, standing awkwardly in the hallway. They weren't holding flowers or balloons, but two large shopping bags. Without a word, they came inside and began unpacking them on her coffee table, packages of diapers, baby wipes, formula, and a stack of gently used onesies and blankets. Maria avoided her eyes, focusing on folding a tiny pink sleeper. "We just thought, you might need some things to get started," she mumbled. There were no prying questions, no whispers of judgment, only a simple, quiet act of kindness that felt like the first breath of air after being held underwater for too long. As she watched them leave, Maya looked from the pile of baby supplies on her table to the sleeping infant in the car seat. The mountain of her problems still loomed, immense and terrifying. The rent was still due, the future was still a terrifying blank page, and the fear was still a constant companion. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of something other than panic. It was a tiny, fragile spark of resolve, the question that had been screaming in her mind for days. How can I possibly do this? Began to subtly change its shape. It was no longer a question of capability, but of logistics. It became, okay, what's the first step? In that small, silent apartment, surrounded by borrowed baby clothes, Maya Clark was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was becoming Lily's mother. The quiet nights were the hardest, but this one was different. It wasn't the silence that was terrifying, but the sound. Lily's breathing was shallow and fast, and her skin felt like a furnace against Maya's cheek. A wave of pure, cold dread washed over her, more intense than anything she had felt before. She fumbled with the thermometer, the digital reading of 103 degrees flashing like a siren in the dark room. Panic seized her. There was no time to think, only to act. Wrapping Lily in a thin blanket, she ran out into the deserted street, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She flagged down a taxi, her voice trembling as she gave the address for the hospital. The city lights blurring past the window into a meaningless smear of color. She was alone, rushing toward another sterile, impersonal building, holding the only thing in the world that mattered. The emergency room was a sea of controlled chaos, just like the saloni, but without any of the warmth. It smelled of antiseptic and despair. They were given a small cubicle with a curtain for a door and told to wait. Hours crawled by. Nurses with tired eyes and hurried footsteps would occasionally glance in, offering a brief, sympathetic smile before being pulled away by a more urgent crisis. Maya sat on the edge of the hard plastic chair, rocking Lily, who was now listless and quiet, her feverish body a fragile weight in her arms. Every cough from another cubicle, every urgent page over the intercom, sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through her. She felt invisible, a small, insignificant island of fear in an ocean of suffering. The loneliness was a physical ache, a heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate her. Finally, a young, exhausted-looking doctor came in. He checked Lily's vitals, listened to her chest, and shone a light in her eyes. His movements efficient and detached. "It's a common respiratory virus," he said, not quite meeting Maya's desperate gaze. "Keep her hydrated, manage the fever. She should be fine in a few days." He handed her a sheet of instructions and was gone before she could form a single question. The clinical dismissal, the sheer ordinariness of his diagnosis in the face of her monumental terror, was the final straw. The wall she had built around her emotions crumbled into dust. She pulled the curtain shut, sank back into the chair, and held her daughter tight as silent, hot tears streamed down her face, a testament to weeks of fear, exhaustion, and overwhelming solitude. In the dim, fluorescent light of the cubicle, she looked down at Lily's sleeping face, so perfect and serene despite the heat radiating from her skin. All the judgment, the financial panic, the sleepless nights, it all faded into the background, replaced by a singular, powerful truth. This tiny, helpless person was her entire world. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. Leaning down, she pressed her lips against her daughter's warm forehead and whispered a vow into the sterile air. "I don't know how, my baby," she murmured, her voice thick with tears, "but I swear I'm going to figure this out. No one will ever hurt you. I'm here. That moment of finding your reason to fight is what changes everything. And if you found yours, I hope you'll subscribe to follow these stories of strength." A profound calm settled over her after the words were spoken. It wasn't that the problems had vanished. The rent was still due, and the hospital bill was a terrifying new mountain to climb. But the question was no longer if she could do it, but simply how. The frantic, desperate energy that had been driving her for weeks was replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. She was no longer a victim of a bizarre circumstance, a girl adrift in a life she hadn't chosen. She was Lily's mother, her protector, her advocate. She gently wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked at her daughter with new eyes. The fear was still a passenger on this journey, but it was no longer in the driver's seat. Maya was, and for the first time, she truly believed they were going to be okay. The story of the nail tech with the surprise baby began to circulate, but not in the way Maya had feared. It wasn't a piece of salacious gossip, but a quiet, human story that resonated through the neighborhood. Maria and Jessica, moved by Maya's quiet desperation, became her first champions. They shared her situation with a few trusted clients who then told their friends. The response was a slow, gentle trickle that soon became a steady stream. A casserole dish would appear on her doorstep, still warm from a neighbor's oven. An older woman from down the hall offered to watch Lily for an hour, just so Maya could take a long, uninterrupted shower. Someone dropped off a bag of outgrown baby clothes. Each small gesture was a stitch, mending the frayed edges of her solitude, weaving her and Lily into the fabric of a community she never knew she had. 2 weeks later, Maria asked Maya to stop by the salon, claiming she needed help with inventory. When Maya walked in, holding Lily against her chest, the familiar hum of hairdryers was replaced by a chorus of surprise. The salon was filled with faces both familiar and new, clients, other local shop owners, and neighbors. In the center of the room was a mountain of gifts, a brand new crib, a car seat still in its box, diapers stacked like building blocks, and countless bags of clothes and toys. A clipboard was passed around, creating a schedule for meal deliveries and babysitting offers. Overwhelmed, Maya could only stand there, tears of gratitude streaming down her face as she looked at the sea of smiling people. The crushing weight of her isolation had been lifted, not by a single miracle, but by 100 small acts of ordinary human kindness. The years that followed were not without their struggles, but they were never again faced alone. Maya returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose, her hands as steady as ever. But her eyes now held a light that had been missing for years. Lily grew from a fragile infant into a bubbly, curious toddler, her laughter echoing through the salon from the safe corner playpen that had become a permanent fixture. The clients adored her, slipping her healthy snacks and cooing over her latest scribbled masterpieces. Maya discovered a strength within herself she never knew she possessed, a fierce, maternal resilience that powered her through long days and sleepless nights. She was no longer just a woman trying to survive. She was a mother, building a life, a vibrant, love-filled existence for her daughter, brick by brick, with the unwavering support of her unconventional, beautiful family. 5 years later, the sign outside read, "Maya and Maria's Beauty Bar." Maya stood behind her chair, a confident business owner, watching a vibrant 5-year-old Lily drawing at a small table in the back. A new client, a young woman with a visible baby bump and fear in her eyes, quietly confessed how scared she was to do it all alone. Maya paused, her scissors hovering in the air. She met the woman's gaze in the mirror, offering a smile that was both gentle and immensely strong. "I know it feels impossible right now," she said, her voice full of a hard-won warmth. "But sometimes, the greatest blessings in life are the ones you never see coming." It's an honor to share stories like Maya's, and subscribing to the channel helps ensure these tales of unexpected strength and community continue to be told.